Hello, everybody. My name is Bobby Gordon. I'm your host today for the Sanford Stem Cell Institute Regen podcast. I am here with Dr. Sheldon Morris. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being on our podcast, and you are a regular guest, so that is fantastic.
Right.
You are the director of the Sanford Stem Cell Clinical Center, but also a professor of Division of Infectious Diseases here at UC San Diego. And today we're going to do a little bit of Stem Cells 101 for those of you that are in our listening audience that may not be so familiar with regenerative medicine, stem cell, cellular medicine. We're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into some of the fundamental basics for you. So, Sheldon, tell us a little bit about your current position at UC San Diego.
Yeah, so I'm the director of the Sanford Stem Cell Clinical Center, which is housed within the Sanford Stem Cell Institute. Our job is to taking new products and doing taking them all first in human studies and beyond and into the actual clinic, so that's my main role in terms of the day-to-day. I'm a professor in, as you noted, in infectious diseases, Department of Medicine, the co-appointment Department of Family Medicine.
Great. Tell us what is regenerative medicine?
Well, regenerative medicine is where we are trying to regain function or retain function from related to disease, age, maybe congenital conditions. I think of it as applicable to many diseases that and conditions that we have. Because there's usually a regenerative medicine sort of angle that you can think of for a lot of our existing diseases.
Great. Speaking of those diseases, what might those encompass? What are the buckets, categories, etc.?
So think about it like this: like if some common diseases, if you could that people would be aware of things like diabetes, for example, right? So that's where you lose your diabetes type 1, where people have to take insulin. They've lost their islet cells in their pancreas. They can't produce insulin. Well, that's a loss of function that we're trying to replace with regenerative medicine. You can have in things like cancer. Cancer is a sort of an aberrant stem cell pathway because these cells have acquired stem cell properties and are propagating, where they're not supposed to be and creating, tumors and whatnot. So that we can think of that as a regenerative medicine approach because they're harnessing stem cell properties to propagate the cancer. And then there's things like neurodegenerative disorders, like your Parkinson's disease. You've lost your dopaminergic cells, so there's a place where you can do it. And it's not like it's all or nothing. You're gradually losing them. So is there a way to prevent loss? That's a regenerative medicine approach. Or replace it. That's another regenerative medicine. Or maybe you can also replace function by doing gene therapy for people are born with a genetic disorder that they're missing a type of pathway or something that gives them profound disability. You could maybe give them gene therapy to replace that factor and normalize their lives. Those would be some of the at least some of the avenues of regenerative medicine.
Thanks for that overview. I'm glad you mentioned stem cells. What is a stem cell?
Yeah. Well, the stem cell has two main properties. It can renew itself, so it can continuously renew itself and remain in sort of this status of being pluripotent, which means their second sort of main function, which is being able to turn into any other kind of cell that they want to. So we have different pathways, right? We're born, and a whole person comes out of a couple cells. But we also then have stem cells that can regenerate the different tissues that we have. So there's a stem cell that will make skin cells, that will make blood cells, and so all along those pathways, you rely on stem cells for your body to continue to exist, basically.
So someone who's recovering from a burn, Does their body use stem cells then to help regenerate that skin? Is that a therapy that is available? How does that play into it?
Well, that's an interesting idea. I mean, when you have something like a burn, like severe burn, it's actually burned through all the tissues and taken away those stem cells, and there's such a large gap that it can't necessarily. I mean, your body would try to heal it, but oftentimes people end up with getting grafts and things like that to try to fill in the gaps. And in a way, that is regenerative. There's other and people have been working on trying to generate sort of in the lab skin tissues that could be used for burns. We haven't done any of those studies, but it sounds like something that could be a very regenerative medicine approach. But we're not quite there where we can regrow a limb. I think we're just trying to but maybe one day we'll get there. Because that takes that has multiple tissues. It would take quite a feat to get to that. But you can see where we're going. We're trying to get to a place where we can replace tissues and maybe one day replace leg. I don't know.
That's fair. There's a myth, I think, when it comes to stem cells and regenerative, and it's not like the reptile that you just grow a new tail, right? So we have a ways to go in that term. Wondering, so oncology, cancer, whether it be tumors or some other type of cancer affliction. HIV is a good example of an infectious disease. How does COVID and the COVID vaccine fit into this with mRNA?
Yeah, what's interesting with the COVID vaccine, I don't know if in itself I would place it regenerative, but it developed because of regenerative medicine, if you can believe it. The messenger RNA, so basically what the COVID vaccines that came out so quickly and helped us so much, they use this messenger RNA technology, right? And basically you inject the messenger RNA and it programs the cell to make the antigen so you can get that. Well, the original idea was to use messenger RNA to reprogram cells and possibly as cancer treatment or as a again, a reprogramming for the regenerative medicine type of applications. And it turned out that this would work really good for a vaccine. So it turns out to be, that some of the research that was really in the regenerative medicine field was a huge benefit to us in the COVID vaccine development.
Thank you for that background. I think that there's a lot of discussion in the regenerative medicine field about the COVID vaccine, mRNA, that type of thing, but it's good to really know what the real scoop is on that. There's a lot of confusion, I think, in the general public over clinical trials, stem cells, what are stem cells, why is that, and what would you say to anybody in the general public that says, oh, that stem cell stuff is bad, or that's not something that's a good research therapy? What would you say to them?
Well, you have to, I would try to address some of the misconceptions. So when I mentioned that I run this regenerative medicine clinical trial thing, some people first think of like that we're doing some sort of like almost a plastic surgery kind of things or cosmetic approaches, and that's not what we're doing. We're really trying to, there could be, applications there, but our goal is to treat serious diseases, the ones that really that are not being treated adequately otherwise. I think the other big misconception is that we're using all these embryonic stem cells, and that's not true. Most of the cells that we use are either taken from the person and reprogrammed and given back to them, or they're induced pluripotent stem cells. So there was fairly, groundbreaking work where they could use certain factors to regress a cell into a stem cell and then reprogramming it in a different direction. So that has really been able to be harnessed so that we don't need embryonic stem cells for use. So I think that would be one of the major things that people probably would be very, make them hesitant about stem cell research. So after that, I don't, what else would it be? I think that once you've got them, rid of those sort of misconceptions, thinking that we could reprogram cells and reverse the course of diseases seems like, why wouldn't you be for that?
Right. Yep. Yeah, thank you for the clarification on that too. Again, I think there's a lot of misnomer in the general public about that. So that's something that I often like to talk with folks about and re-clarify for them. Secret to aging? I've heard, that we can reverse aging or we can slow down aging. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, that there is a lot of things that we learn through regenerative medicine research that apply to aging. Aging is a degenerative process, and so that I mentioned that earlier, that reversing degeneration is one of the key goals, and so aging falls within that. Aging also, at the cellular level, makes people have mutations, leads to cancer. So it has a lot to do with the evolution of diseases that we're trying to affect. So by studying, aging processes, we're at the same time trying to figure out ways that we can prevent cancer, detect early, pre-cancer, as you will, mutations that will lead to cancer later. And it's not just mutations, but there's other ways that the cell acts in terms of, we talk about RNA, there's different cellular mechanisms, and then in the whole omics field that you might find that relates to it. So, we might find things that actually delay aging or reverse some components of aging, and that would be probably a real bonus. A lot of people would be very interested in that for sure.
Absolutely. It's definitely a buzz topic within regen medicine.
Right.
Absolutely. So maybe Ponce de Leon had something to go on there with the Fountain of Youth. Maybe it's right here at UC San Diego. Who knows? We'll find out. With that, so space is a big forefront for research. Why do we do regenerative medicine and stem cell research in space? Why aren't we just doing it in a laboratory here on Earth?
Well, it turns out space is a very good medium for studying some of the regenerative medicine. So, and we've been at the forefront of some of this research. I mean, with several investigators have had missions that go up to the International Space Station with organoids and stem cells and cancer cells. And what we find is that cells age more rapidly in space, it appears. They develop the pre-cancer things that we see. Cancer takes off when it's in space. So all of a sudden we see that space can be used to study the mechanisms of these diseases in an expedited way or accelerated way and then we could, following that, maybe we could test ways to stop that acceleration or treat that. And so it makes a whole new use of space for implications that really do have to affect all of us, because if we find those new treatments or have new tools that come out of space research that can be applied to us down here on Earth, that makes the whole sort of industry, space industry, more valuable to us.
Absolutely. So overall, space is an accelerator for regenerative medicine stem cell research that really speeds up that from bench to bedside mentality and that actual application process here on Earth.
That's how we view it, and what our findings have been, and so as part of the institute, we have several of the centers working in particularly in space type research, and so we're really hopeful that we're going to continue that, because that's really cutting edge. That's really new place for where science can develop, that we didn't even think of before. And I mean, and of course there's the application of, if humanity ever wanted to go to Mars, or if they want to go interplanetary, that length of space travel you need to know the biology, and if it's causing rapid aging or other disease states, we need to be able to block those and reverse those. So that's sort of a whole different avenue that is needed. But I see it as, I don't know, I'm very for us, humanity achieving goals such as curing HIV, curing diseases, going to other planets. That's who we are to me.
Absolutely. We use a term a lot that I hear of a lot, organoids. What are organoids and how does that play into stem cell regenerative medicine research?
Sure, organoids are, I don't do the organoid research myself, but here's how, basically they're taking a stem cell and pushing it down a path so that it develops like as it would in a neurological system, the very beginnings of a neurological, just sort of like a bunch, enough that you might see a little blob of tissue that would be, act like neural tissue in the brain, or from the liver, or from any organ tissue. So why is that important? Well, we can use those organoids because when cells are in a group, they act differently than on their own. So it allows us to study disease processes and just the stem cell pathways as well in those organoids. And so it's a whole nother avenue for research again of how we can, test new treatments, develop new therapies. And so it's pretty exciting, and we've sent, I think we've had brain organoids in space, and our plans are to, bring other organoids from other organ systems up there as well.
Especially organs like the liver and things that help us process things.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the technical term, things that process things. Give our listeners a little bit of insight because we get a lot of questions about clinical trials, and then what are the applications of that. It takes a long time to not only get a clinical trial up to speed, but then also to then figure out the applications for that. So from end to end, this is not a quick process.
No, and there's a good reason for that. It's a very thoughtful process. There's a lot of regulatory aspects to that, making sure, it's like do no harm, right? We've all heard that as that, but that's very important in research, that we are planning these things to develop new therapies, but with the safety involved. And so that's why over the years there's been a system developed that we abide by, that we can that we both have well thought out clinical trials that has good data behind it, good animal data, and then good trial design to be sure that that we're doing it as to do the least amount of harm if there was any. Ideally, in those first studies, we're really looking for we're moving from all these various animal models into a human, and we're saying, is it safe in the human? Are all our sort of assumptions were right? And then if we're getting to, then we get to maybe see some that it does the what we call efficacy, or it has some effect of what we want to see. And that leads us to the next trial, that we can then test whether the differences we see are better than what you would do either with a placebo, where you don't get any treatment because there is another existing, or maybe there's an existing treatment already, but we want it to be better, so we compare it to that. And then it takes a while for those to see if there's a benefit out of that, and then to finally bring it to market, we have to show that in a larger number of people that would hold maybe so in a typical phase 1 study is that safety study. Phase 2 is really showing that there's efficacy, whether if people take the drug perfectly, and they do take it all the time. So that kind of excludes people that didn't take it because they didn't like it, or they couldn't adhere to it. And then when you head to a phase 3 study, we're doing a larger population where we're counting the result as if you were assigned to take the product, regardless of whether you finish it or take it at all, you're still counted in that group. So it's more like a real world scenario. We're trying to show that it not only is it efficacious, but it's tolerable, and people can stay on it, sustain it. And then at that point, if it still shows that it shows benefit, that's where we can apply to try and get a what we call a new drug application.
Fantastic. Thank you for that overview. I think in general, some of the general public is a little averse about clinical trials, right? So it's nice to know that there's a thoughtful, intentional process that is lengthy and drawn out with lots of T's crossed and I's dotted without getting into all the regulatory ins and outs of that. But that's on purpose and that's intentional.
Absolutely, and yeah, it's important to know that we also do studies because we don't know what the answer is.
Mm-hmm.
So when people come to clinical, sometimes they do it because they want to help move the science, where they want to help people like themselves at the conditions that they have. They may see benefit from the studies themselves, but they may not. So that's always an important thing to communicate with people that are participating, that we don't know the answer yet, but you're really helping us decide that. And if it in fact helps them, that's really a big win.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to a phase 3, you're expecting that there's going to be some benefit, and usually there's a check in place that if we see early results showing that it's really good, that we stop the study and allow and tell everybody, well, this seems to work, so let's give it to everybody.
That's always the goal, right?
Yep.
That's great. Well, Dr. Sheldon Morris, thank you for taking the time today on our Regen podcast. I appreciate you diving into some of the fundamentals of regenerative medicine and stem cell research. Appreciate you having you here and hope to have you back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to be here.